Are you a parent navigating the complexities of co-parenting, family court, or even domestic violence? If you are looking for ways to help protect your children and build a strong and supportive community around you, then look no further. Grey Minds Think Alike is your go-to resource for everything related to the complexities of family life. Join us as we dive into thoughtful conversations with experts and explore practical tips and strategies for tackling the challenges of parenthood in the throes of adversity so that no parent feels alone and every child's safety is protected. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first edition of Grey Minds Think Alike. Today is a little bit different than all the other podcasts will be. We are doing something called Meet Your Host. I thought it'd be really important for everyone to know who Ali Kessler is and why we're doing this podcast. So today's episode will be featuring me, Ali Kessler, and our host today will be my best friend since high school, Erin Cooper.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm happy to host.
Thanks for coming.
And as you said, we've been friends since we were 14, I would say.
Yeah, 14 is when I moved.
So we've been through a lot of life changes together.
That is definitely a true statement.
And so I thought what would be the best way to start for people to get to know you was to find out about what your life was like before you were a mom. What did you envision your future to look like?
Oh, gosh. Let's see. What did I envision my future? Definitely not what it is. Yes. I was very hopeful. I had a lot of dreams. And, I was pretty adventurous. I moved around a lot as an adult. I moved to Colorado. I moved to New York City. And my life was, pretty normal. I had a very normal life. I had, great friends. I always had some, good jobs.
Yeah.
I traveled. I did sketch comedy when I lived in New York City. I worked at a sleepaway camp.
And you were always very motivated, always a very good student. You went to a great university.
Correct.
And always had advanced degrees. You're always working towards that next big step.
Correct. I went to University of Florida for my undergrad with a bachelor's in advertising and a minor in English. I then went to the Art Institute of Fort Lauderdale for graphic design, and that was a pretty awesome program. And then most recently, I went back to school at Full Sail University and got a degree in digital marketing just so I can sort of hone in on all the digital stuff that I was working on, which also related to the advertising and the graphic design and whatnot. So
and I've always been very impressed with how you were never handed like a lot of money to start off. You really had to work. You had to get loans. You had to get credit cards to pay for your housing. I mean, you really hustled in life. Nothing was handed to you. And I've always been very impressed by that.
Well, thank you. Yeah. I mean, my parents were divorced growing up. So, we didn't come from a lot of money. We were pretty middle class, but we were never in need of anything.
Right.
I was able to do well in school, and I got, a lot of student grants and student loans, and I was able to still continue with my trajectory and not be hindered.
Well, so you moved to New York a little later in life, I guess, in your early 30s?
For the third time.
For the third time, yes. That's the most recent.
Yes, that was mid-30s.
Mid-30s.
Yes.
And as an onlooker, it seemed to me like you were going to New York to expand your career and to find the love of your life.
Yes. I mean, at the time I was sort of just sort of stagnant here in Fort Lauderdale. I was in between jobs. I was doing freelance work at home, and I was just very unmotivated. And I just felt like, a new change of scenery and, a little New York City life could do me some good.
Yeah.
So I just, I actually was going to move to Portland, Oregon, and I went to Oregon for 2 weeks. And I had so much fun there. I went to waterfalls and hikes, and it was just beautiful. And then I came home and I said, nope, not moving to Portland. I think I'll go to New York City. It wasn't for me. I was like, I need to get dressed up every now and again.
Yeah. And I think where's more fun, to be single and living the best life is New York City, right?
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in New York, outside of the city, but then after college I moved back to the city. So I was able to experience that right after college. And then, it was definitely a good stepping stone, and I was able to meet a lot of good people for career, for friends.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean,
you were there for how long?
That time I was there for about 4 years.
And then you moved back home.
I moved back home
for a job, and I think you kind of missed your family and friends.
Yeah, it was getting, you can only do New York City for a certain amount of time before you just feel completely drained. As fun as exciting as it is, it's exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I had a few job offers. I had one in Brooklyn that I accepted. And then I had a job offer from a big ad agency here in Fort Lauderdale that seems almost too good to be true. They were in my hometown, so my family would be here. They were offering me a good and competitive salary and benefits. And they also offered to pay for my relocation, which, it just seemed like a no-brainer. If I ever did want to come back, I was like, they were going to pay for it. They seemed to really want me, which was, a nice feeling. So I ended up actually accepting that position in the end.
So at this point, when you were in New York City, you were casually dating John. And we should note that this man will be Greyson's father. But you're casually dating John.
Not the whole time, just the last month I was in New York.
Okay. Yeah. And you had not discussed, let's get pregnant. This was not a plan that you and John had.
No, we didn't have any kind of plan. In fact, we had met a year prior to our dating. Mm-hmm. We met online on Match or one of those dating sites. We met and we hung out like 2 nights in a row on a weekend. And then he literally sent me a text message saying that he didn't think it was going to work out, that I reminded him of Chelsea Handler and Amy Schumer, and that he didn't see me as being the mother of his children.
Which you at the time thought that was an incredible compliment.
My reply was, thank you.
Thank you. Right.
Yes,
I love Amy Schumer.
Of course.
Chelsea
I was
Handler.
like, that means I'm doing something right. And I was like, okay, it was no skin off my back. We just met, okay, nice knowing you, know.
Other fish in the sea, no problem.
So then a year later, on Valentine's Day, so this is 2016, John sent me a text message asking if I wanted to meet for a drink. Mm-hmm. And I was actually out with a girlfriend of mine after work. We were having a little single galentine's, and I was actually right near where just adjusted. And so I, just humored it, and I just went. And I was like, okay,
right,
let's just see,
And I remember you telling me at the time, because you always dated kind of the cool guy, the handsome cool guy of the group, right? And I always remember giving you a hard time, like, oh, Ali, you don't always have to be with the hottest, coolest guy around, which was, anyways, crazy.
Which apparently I do because of my current boyfriend, but yes.
Boyfriend is pretty cute. So you texted me and said, I'm giving a nice guy a try.
Yeah, I don't remember saying that, but
yes.
Sure.
So this was what
he was definitely different than my normal, my norm, I guess.
Yes. And I remember thinking, okay, good for you, Al. Give a nice guy a try.
Yeah. And this was, like I said, Valentine's Day. So we dated casually for that month, but I had accepted that job and I knew I was moving away.
Yeah.
So I knew that it was never going to go anywhere.
And you guys were just sort of like, see you later.
Yeah, I was just like, I'm moving to Florida, keep in touch or not.
Or not, yeah.
And that was it.
And then I remember being out to dinner with you and you jokingly saying, yeah, well, who knows? I could be pregnant. And I was so surprised. And you said, oh, I'm just kidding. I took a pregnancy test this morning because your period was late and your period is not normally late.
Yeah.
And you were like, no, I'm definitely not pregnant. But it was a foreshadowing into what would become a revelation later.
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of, I feel like God's intervention that I did accept that job in Florida because I was living in a 3rd floor walk up in New York City.
Right.
And I just couldn't imagine if I had taken the job in Brooklyn, how I would have managed to have a newborn in a walk-up apartment with a stroller and whatnot. So I feel like, me moving to Florida was sort of this crazy coincidence. And, my family was here to obviously help me with Greyson.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean.
So, all right. So surprise, you're pregnant. How did you feel? And what were some of your hopes and dreams for this baby?
Oh my gosh, I was so scared. I didn't know what, I thought it was a joke. I went to like 4 doctors just to double check.
Didn't you take like 5 pregnancy tests?
I took like 10. I think I took about 10. And I was just sort of like, this can't be right.
Right. Right. This can't be real.
And then I just sort of, let it sink in a little. And of course I had to sort of think about, well, what does this mean? I live alone. And, obviously John and I were not together.
Right.
So I actually had to think about, well, would I keep this baby? Is this something that I want?
Right.
At the time I was 39 years old and this is the first time I've ever gotten pregnant.
Right.
And, I had a good job and I just felt like I was in a good place mentally to take on this new role. And I decided that I was going to go ahead and have a baby.
So you called John and gave him the news eventually, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure you went to a few doctor's appointments beforehand.
Yeah, I, said we have to talk and we did. And I told him and, I could have not told him and lived on and lived a happily ever after with my child. But I opted to tell him because I thought at the time that it was the right thing.
Yeah.
And he was just not happy about it. He wanted no part of being a father. He wanted no part of me. He wanted no part of our lives. He made it very clear that he would not be present and that this was just not what he wanted. And I said, okay, I understand.
Uh-huh.
You can sign away your rights, whatever we need to do. But I'm going to have this baby. And, at the time, John was still living in New York, New Jersey. And I was in Florida. So we weren't, living in the same city. And, I sort of left the ball in his court and went from there. I started getting just really horrible text messages and harassing behaviors at that time, to the point where I actually had to block his phone number while I was pregnant because it was just not healthy. And I was trying to make it as positive, the most positive pregnancy experience that I could.
Yes.
And
it was a pretty good pregnancy. You didn't seem very sick. You seemed pretty joyful. And I was so relieved for you.
Yeah. I mean, everything, until the very end where I just started swelling up and getting, really big, but everything, was easy. I didn't have no issues,
And the birth was beautiful. I was lucky to be there.
Yes, you were. She was.
I was in the delivery room. I actually was the first person to see him. And he was just perfect.
Yep, he certainly was.
And just gazing up at you right when he was born, just like you guys locked eyes. It was a really beautiful moment.
Oh, you're going to make me cry.
Yes, I'm sorry. But he's just a special boy. So Greyson was born. And then things changed with John. He decided to move here.
Yes.
Correct? Was that right away?
It was within a couple months. Yeah.
Right. And I remember him coming down and getting a paternity test.
Well, yeah, he did like his own version that he bought from CVS without me knowing. And he swabbed Grayson's cheek and, sure enough, he was the father.
Right.
Which, was also contentious. He didn't believe he was the father.
Right.
He didn't believe, the entire pregnancy that he was the father.
Right.
Which I'm not sure why anyone would make that up, because the minute the child's born, that you can prove otherwise.
Right.
Or you can prove it.
So initially we already had some glimpses into his instability, but we didn't recognize it at the time.
Sure. I mean, I, obviously thought that, I would think that most men would probably be scared if, a woman said that they were pregnant and you're the father.
Right.
I get that. But I was not expecting the level of hatred that came along with it, and blame and just overall,
vitriol.
Yeah. I mean, it was unwarranted. And, at some point you just have to just accept that this is reality.
Yeah.
Or not. He could have been like, okay, well, good luck. I will sign away my rights and walk away. And he could have lived the life that he wanted to live.
And so
I never asked him to, be a part of our lives.
No. Right. So he took you to court when Greyson was a baby.
Yeah, he was like, when he first moved down here, he wanted to do everything organically. He said, I don't want to use lawyers. They're just going to eat our money. And, let's sort of, do this just amicably and whatnot. And sure enough, within 6 months, I was served papers that he was suing for paternity and a name change. He actually wanted me to change Grayson's last name to his, which he wasn't even on the birth certificate.
Right.
So.
Right. So how did that go in court?
Well, he did not get the name change, thankfully. But at the time, I was told when I hired counsel that if a man wants 50% custody, they will get 50% custody.
Wow.
I now know that was a rebuttable presumption, meaning that right now a new law has been passed that's called the 50-50 law in layman's terms. But that was not a law when Greyson was born, which means that it could have been argued a little bit more than it was.
Right. And so did you guys have 50-50 from the onset?
We did like a step up program. So it started off with just some visitation, like during the week at my house. He'd come and give Greyson a bath and then put him to bed. And then we started doing overnights on the weekend one night. And then from there, it got bumped up to 50%.
Right. And how did you feel about this arrangement?
Not good. I did not like handing my baby over to a stranger. I was breastfeeding when John first moved down, and I didn't know John very well. I never lived with him. We were never married. I just basically was handing my child to a stranger. So I was really not happy about that. But I also didn't want to interfere with him bonding with Greyson. So I accepted that. And, I did what I could to sort of, make this the best possible experience for us all.
And I think for Greyson, he had the most wonderful life with you. Can you give people an idea of what maybe a typical day looked like for you and Greyson?
Oh my gosh. Well, in the beginning, a typical day was, waking up with him as an infant and giving him his bottle and watching cartoons. And he was instantly in love with Daniel Tiger.
As were you.
Well, yes. And then I became obsessed with all the music and I would just sing songs. And then we started, when he was getting a little bit older, we were able to do some activities. We did swim class when he was only 3 months, a mommy and me swim. I took him to a bunch of mommy and me classes at like my gym and music class. And just I just had so much fun just spending time with him one-on-one, either just, going at one of his classes or just going to the park, or, as he got older, we used to go to the pool. He loved water slides. And then we just started doing more adventurous activities. I took him to Disney a few times. I took him to SeaWorld because he was obsessed with orcas.
That Disney trip where he met Mickey when he was a baby, and the whole park was talking about this baby who loved Mickey.
He was so animated, and he kept I'm trying to think how old. I think he was about 7 months old. Actually, I got in my memories today from Facebook was the day we went. Was the day we went today. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So we went to a meet and greet, and he saw Mickey Mouse because we watched Mickey Mouse's Clubhouse, and he just started squeezing Mickey's nose and squealing, like he would laugh, like squeeze it and be like, and Grey was named Gigs because he had this infectious laugh that you just couldn't help but laugh back. So he just started squealing and screaming with delight about meeting Mickey. And there was a photographer there, that takes the pictures for the meet and greet. And later on that day, before we left the park, I went over to the place where you pick up the pictures to see if you want to buy them. And I was waiting in line, and I was listening to the staff that worked there, and they were literally saying this baby from this morning was just the cutest thing they ever saw, and that they were just amazed, and just all this adorable, conversation. And I'm like, were you guys just talking about Greyson? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, I'm his mom, and I'm here to pick up the pictures. And, it was just so cute because, a lot of times babies, when they meet characters, get scared.
For sure.
And he loved it, and he continued to love Mickey. So we went a few times.
And you guys traveled together. You went on cruises.
Yep. We did 2 cruises, which he loved both.
Yeah. He had a really wonderful life. What was his favorite meal? You made him like spaghetti meatballs a lot.
He went through little phases, but I mean, he always loved, chicken nuggets and macaroni and cheese. He loved IKEA meatballs. Normal kid stuff, obviously pizza, but he also loved odd snacks at night. Like his bedtime snack would be like salami or just the most random thing.
And as your friend, I can say that it was the happiest I'd ever seen you.
Yeah. I mean, it was the first time in my life where I felt like, okay, this is my purpose. I found my way. I didn't even care what else really happened. As long as Greyson was with me, everything was good.
Right. And in a roundabout way, you did find your true love in New York City.
I say that all the time. Yeah, I did.
So back to Greyson's father. Co-parenting was a challenge a lot of the time. And what are some ways that he used to try and manipulate you and gain control over your life?
He just made everything difficult. There was nothing that was not contested, even if it was just a conversation, just about schedule or time. I mean, everything was just a battle.
Right. Like
which is fine. For example. Preschool was a nightmare. Greyson was zoned to go to school wherever I was. So it shouldn't have been that big of an issue. I toured about like 10 different preschools, and I made a whole deck, an Excel spreadsheet of the schools and the pros and the cons and the costs and what they offered and just everything.
Right.
And he literally just said no to all of them. And he said the only one that he would agree to was one that was by him, which was 30 minutes from me.
Right.
So everything was just a no. So it was really hard to co-parent with someone that just constantly didn't agree on anything.
And did you recognize that as a ploy for control, or did you?
I recognized it as him trying to be as difficult as possible, because he literally told me time and time again, even when I would come pick up Grey with Grey present, he would say, my life goal will be to make you suffer. So he was doing everything in his power to make that happen. He would never make anything easy or just do the right thing, or even just do anything that was in Greyson's best interest. It was always about hurting me first. Greyson was, second.
Right. And how did you reach out for help during this period of time when he was being so difficult and manipulative?
I mean, of course. I had a lawyer that was handling my, my case.
And you kept her up to date on all the things that were
I would screenshot everything, and I would text her every little thing that John did, throughout his 4 years. And John definitely did, aside from, little things, or even text messages and harassing and stalking and all of the things that we know that happened at the end. He stopped paying for things. He never agreed to pay for things. He didn't pay for school. I would end up paying, and then we'd have to try to get the money on the back end. It was just it was always contentious. And, I just never really knew what would happen or what was going on behind closed doors with him and Grey, because I never saw them together. And I never lived with him. So it was just really hard to gauge what was going on when I wasn't there.
So when did you first feel fear for yourself or for your child?
Well, I was honestly from day one. From the minute I found out I was pregnant, I had fear. I didn't know this man, so I didn't know what he was capable of.
Right.
When I was pregnant, he started sending me text messages, alluding that he had severe mental issues, including PTSD, and he said that he had tried to commit suicide before, and that he was in a cult until he was about 23, called the Moonies, and that he suffered extensive trauma and brainwashing, and that he was manipulated, and it took him years of intensive therapy to trust people again. And he was just telling me all these things, which at the time I thought he was just trying to scare me. And I didn't even know if this was true. It sounded so insane to me that this could even be a true statement.
Right, because he told you that in an attempt to get you to abort the pregnancy, right?
Correct. He wanted me to not have the baby. So he was giving me, what I now know to be true insights.
Right.
Of reasons why. He said that autism ran in his family. He said that, obviously his mental health. He said that he was moving to China. I just had no idea, obviously what was real and what was not, until I Googled it. And I actually found some extensive articles about him and the cult, and his mother, I think, was quoted in it. And I realized that it really actually was true.
Yeah. But at this point,
at this point I was already pregnant.
There's, in your mind, there was really only one option for you at that time.
Yeah. Like I said, I was already, yeah.
Yeah. So, we're moving into a part that's hard to talk about. The things started ramping up in terms of his vitriol toward you, his negativity, and his delusional behavior, maybe.
Yeah.
When would you say that really began?
I would say from the beginning. I think it's pretty delusional for someone to try to hurt a woman that's pregnant verbally and constantly, harass me via text and insult me. And just, I felt like that was abusive right there.
Definitely.
And to the point where I had to block his phone number because it wasn't good for my health.
Sure.
And then, I just knew that it wasn't normal that after even Grey was born and he's here. We have to move forward. We have to figure out a way to move forward. That he could never move forward. And he would still bring up the past of why he's so angry and and, kids deserve better than this, and that we should never bring a child into a broken home, and that, this is not the life that he wanted. This is not the life that Greyson deserves. And just all of this, narcissistic behavior where he was up here, I was down here, and which, was so false to me because I grew up from a divorced home. And I know that it is pretty common nowadays to have a divorced home or a separated home or a 2-family home or even a, same-sex home or just a very unconventional family. So it didn't make any sense to me.
And he definitely displayed a level of cruelty throughout your entire relationship with him. But towards the end of Greyson's life, when Greyson was 4, he still couldn't get over his anger, and he started to become unhinged.
Yep, putting it mildly. Although I think that his psychopathic tendencies were always there.
Right.
Always caused me strife.
And COVID probably didn't help. He was very isolated, I imagine.
Yeah, true.
And because
but we all were, and not everyone murders their child, but yes,
of course not. But someone who is already at a high level of insanity. Right. I don't know the right terminology, but So
it exacerbated, I'm sure, whatever mental issues he had.
That's a good way to put it. So, we're moving into January, February, these months, he finds out you're dating someone. Things start to get very scary on your end.
Yeah. It definitely escalated. Throughout Greyson's life, there were some instances that were very scary and, maybe not dangerous, but not normal. I'm not going to go into details now, but, he made a big, he once honked outside my house and called the police on himself to pick up Greyson, which, they ended up making him go away. He caused a big riff at his school. I mean, just really unusual behavior that definitely was alarming.
Yes.
Not normal. And then, towards, Greyson's final few months, his behaviors were just even more erratic. I believe that I thought I was either being followed or tracked, or that he hired like a PI.
Right, because he once mentioned that you were out late one night and you were at my house till like 10:30.
Yeah, it was your son's birthday party, and he had texted the next morning, you were probably out late last night, so if you want me to take Grey today, so you can sleep.
Right.
I can. And I remember thinking, like, how did he know what time we got home?
Right.
I mean, we were at your house. Grey was playing with children. It was 10 o'clock, which was late for Grey, but I wouldn't quite say that's late for me.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was very odd.
He had so much fun too. The kids were dancing and playing, and it was...
Yeah. There were multiple things where he said something and I was just like, how did he know where I was? And I would even ask Grey sometimes, I'm like, did you tell Daddy we went to so-and-so? And he would say no. And I'd be like, okay, and just think nothing of it.
Right.
But just thought it was very odd. And it didn't leave me. Like, I always had it in the back of my mind. And
throughout this period of time, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. Throughout this period of time, you are reaching out and trying to get help, correct?
Oh, of course. I mean, I, again, would contact my lawyer and, tell her, keep her in the loop of everything that was going on and, how the behaviors were escalating, whether it be he literally didn't pay for school, he wouldn't pay for camp. He started stalking me. He started creating fake social media accounts and contacting me as someone else. He started contacting my my boyfriend at the time, and pretending that he was someone looking to hire him. And he was having his friends contact my boyfriend, and he was doing credit checks on everyone in my family and background checks, and just really just unusual behavior. I mean, to the point where like, I just felt like I was being watched and stalked and harassed. And of course the text messages and whatnot were just getting uglier and meaner. They were always pretty ugly and mean, but they were just getting elevated to another level of ugly and mean. And I will say that during the entire course of Greyson's life, anything that John would say always sounded a bit delusional, meaning I always felt like he lived in his own reality, if that makes sense. Like his version, the way he saw things was not accurate in any way. And it wasn't reality. It was his version of an altered state of reality.
Right. I remember you saying that he would say things like, well, maybe we'll end up in a house together with a picket fence. And
well, I mean, he texted me and, you know, I hate you. You're disgusting. You're a pig. You're this, you're that. Greyson deserves better. How could you bring Greyson in this dysfunctional life that you live, and you're a fraud and you're a liar and you lied to get pregnant and you this, you that. You know, and then 5 minutes later, you're beautiful. Let's get married. Let's take Greyson to Hawaii. Let's live together. I mean, it literally in the same day to go to a high and a low like that, I knew was not normal.
Right.
And when I say not normal, I mean, mentally he was unstable. Right. And that is just something that I knew from the get-go, because mentally stable people don't do or say the things that he did and that he did.
Yeah.
He once just started kidnapping Greyson's belongings every time I'd send him to his house for the weekend or night or whatever it was. Whatever clothes or things that he was wearing or had with him, he wouldn't give back. And then I would say something like, can I get that back? Can I get his clothes? Can I get his shoes? All his shoes were gone. And he's like, why don't you take the child support money that I give you and buy him more stuff? And I just remember thinking, what kind of comment is that? Who is hijacking a kid's shoes just to prove a point? And then one day when he came to pick up Grey, he brought a bag of Grey stuff and just threw each item on my lawn in front of Grey. Here you go. You want your things back? And he would like, throw it. Go get it. Go get it, you pig. I mean, it was just really,
wow.
And, you know, and I'd be like, oh, that's really, you know, I'd say that's really great to do in front of your child.
Yeah.
And then he'd be like, and he would literally say, well, you should have thought of that before you lied to get pregnant. And this was when Greyson was about 3.
Right.
I mean, he was here already.
Wow. I don't think I've ever heard that story.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry that happened.
Yeah. I mean, I just wanted his shoes.
Yeah.
Like, it shouldn't be that difficult to get shoes.
So you felt frightened and you felt that things were...
I didn't even know what to do at this point. I was just, you know, and then I was relying on my lawyer to sort of, you know, butt in and say what we can do here, because no parent should live like this.
Right.
This wasn't a contentious divorce. This wasn't a breakup. This wasn't like he was bitter that, you know, we split up and he didn't want to break up or whatnot. Right. We never were together. And I gave him the opportunity to see if he wanted to be a family. He didn't. And he never voiced anything else. So I just never really understood where this was all coming from, or not even where it was coming from, because he would just say that this is not what he wanted. And I guess he was angry, but I didn't understand what the end goal was. Yeah. Like at some point, like, was he just waiting until Grey was 18 to stop? Or was like, what did he really want? Like, that's what I still don't know what the answer is to that.
Well, we do know that he constantly stated that his goal was to make you miserable.
Yes.
And that seemed to be an overriding theme in your co-parenting.
Yes, and you know, as much as I hated it, I was like, you know what, I have this beautiful child, and you know, no matter how upsetting John made me, I just looked at Grey and it just sort of made it all better.
Yes, because Grey was a joy. So I remember the day that Grey was missing. You called me. I was on my way home from a trip, and you said Grey's missing. And I remember saying to you that John is probably just trying to upset you, and that that things like this don't happen. Things like this don't happen. Yeah. He's going to be fine. And you said, but his car is there, because you had gone several times. And so I don't want you to have to go through the entire day, but when did you first, I already know, but
no, I know.
When did you find out that John had murdered our sweet, sweet boy?
Crazy enough, that day was just, me running around like a mad woman trying to find my child. And I feel like it shouldn't have been that difficult to get help or police involved. But I tried to get a few, wellness checks and tried to go to the apartment. He lived in a gated community. So it was, I couldn't go to the door.
Right.
I had to get the police involved, and they went out 5 times, and they just said, we can't go out another time. The child is just with his father.
Right.
Which, at this point it was my parenting time, so I didn't understand why no one was actually putting an Amber Alert out or saying, okay, actually these are 2 missing people, not just Greyson, but John is missing too. Right. No one has seen either of them in 2 days.
Right.
He did not show up for school, Greyson. He wasn't called in. I called his teachers. Nobody called him out sick. So at this point there were 2 missing people, and the police just would not step in because they said this is family court and that you need to do certain things. You have to get an emergency pickup order or this, that, and the other. And I was like, this is crazy. My child is missing. John is missing.
Right.
I told them that I believe, John, could have killed himself, hurt themselves, done something. I had John's family they called on their own accord, call the Fort Lauderdale police stating, I believe my brother may have killed himself and there's a toddler stranded in the apartment.
Right.
And they still wouldn't go in.
Yeah.
And they said, well, why do you feel that way? And, one of the sisters said that it was just a feeling that she had. They haven't been able to reach or contact John in a few days. And, the circumstances obviously of that day. And they said, well, a feeling isn't enough. It's liability, which to me is just insane. And then, as we ended up hiring a locksmith to break down the door.
Yeah.
And sort of, coordinating with the landlord who lived out of state and the Fort Lauderdale police to finally go and break down that door, which you paid for. And
because I
had to do something. I just don't understand where there was no sense of urgency to understand what was going on.
And we were just sitting in your apartment.
I was sitting there just not even knowing, I didn't even know what to think. I remember I started driving over to the apartment because they said, okay, meet us down there, and then I got a phone call from the neighbor stating that maybe it's a good idea if I don't come.
Right.
And I didn't really understand why, but I was like, okay, well, maybe I won't,
Right. Because she said it might look like a custody battle problem.
Right. Something along those lines. And honestly, I was just scared, and I lived about 25 minutes away. So I was like, all right, fine, I won't come. Text me when they're there, whatnot.
Yeah.
So I got a text from the neighbor stating that the locksmith and the police had just shown up.
Right.
And this was about, give or take, around 11 p.m. It was late at night already. And I was just waiting. I was just waiting and texting, what's going on? Are they there? What did they answer? What happened?
Yeah.
A million texts go by, no reply. And and then I would call the neighbor and no answer. And at this point I was just thinking, why wouldn't someone get back to you?
Yeah.
And of course I just sort of went into this mode where I was laying in my closet. I don't know why. I was
maybe I just felt safer on the floor of my closet and waiting, crying, like just in a, I don't even know what the state I was in, but sort of in shock, I guess.
Yeah.
And then I remember that my phone rang and Jared picked it up, and it was the police, and they asked if we were home. And this was probably like 3, 4 in the morning at this point.
Yeah.
And he's like, yes, but they had an old address of mine, and they actually showed up to an old place that I lived. And so, he gave them our correct address, and about an hour, 2 hours later, I think it was around almost 5 a.m. at this point, the police knocked on my door, and in came the detective, a social worker, a priest, and I just knew my life was forever over.
Yeah.
And it was all just a blur from there on. I really just was in shock, and I just didn't really believe this could happen. This could happen to an innocent little baby. But it did, and it does. And I think that's what's really important for people to know, that this does happen. And I've met other parents this has happened too. And it's not as one-off as everyone thinks. That things need to change in our world, not even just the United States, but family court has some serious flaws. And the fact that I couldn't get the police to help me, and the fact that, my injunction was denied, when I tried to get a restraining order, stating that, all the, because I did get some text messages that were very alarming about me getting decapitated. And, I tried to be proactive ahead of time, and, so this wouldn't happen. And, no, it's like they didn't believe me, or they don't see this type of abuse as being abuse. And it's like they wait for the worst to happen before they actually make change. And it has to change, because we have to be able to stop this before it gets to the point of no return.
Right. And did you feel that you were dismissed often as just a crazy mom?
I mean, I know other parents do. I never even got the opportunity to even get in front of a judge.
Yeah.
I never even got the opportunity to even do more, because no one really took it seriously.
Yeah.
There were 4 years of behavioral patterns that were red flags, that could have, changed our custody arrangement, could have gotten John the mental help that he needed.
Yeah.
Could have, changed our whole trajectory of our relationship.
Right. And it's important that you're saying all of this, because I know for myself, I had no idea that what he was doing was a form of abuse, gaslighting and coercive control. These were sort of new ideas in my world.
Right. And me too. I mean, I never heard of coercive control prior to it happening. I knew that he was narcissistic, and I was actually reading a book called Co-Parenting with a Narcissist.
Yeah.
But, now after the fact, when it was introduced to me, I mean, clearly every red flag was there for coercive control. And, when I've talked to, professionals, after Greyson's death, they're all aware of it's called the power of wheel, or wheel of power, or something along those lines, where that's how you gauge when an individual is trying to gain all that control over you. So he was doing that by stalking me. He was doing that by tracking my car. He was doing that by using Greyson as a pawn. He was doing that by controlling my finances, by not paying for things. He was doing that by insulting me and harassing me. In all of these ways, he was using that as control. And so that it wasn't just me getting what I wanted. He needed to be able to have the entitlement.
Right. And I think that this is so powerful because you didn't have this information before. Had you had this information, you might.
If I knew coercive control was a thing, if I knew all of these were things, I would have been like, ding, 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 ding. I mean, obviously, the level of crazy that I endured for 4 years was not a normal, like, co-parenting existence. I mean, I knew other parents have, co-parenting issues that, probably stem from, divorce, bitterness, or, breaking up or whatnot, but not to the level of, insanity that John had, as we didn't have that experience together. So
right.
I just never, I never understood.
So, what was this support system like for you after Greyson's death? And were there any services that were provided to you that helped you?
Well, I mean, obviously I see a grief counselor, at least weekly, just to help. I feel like, everyone's like, oh, is it helping? And I'll say nothing will ever help. I always say, like, you may see me here, I'm sitting here, but I died that day. The version of Ali that existed before is not here. I may still smile at times or laugh at a funny show, but it's hollow, and I cry in between, and I don't sleep at night. And, my anxiety level is through the roof. So I basically just have to learn how to live as a new person, and that has all of this trauma, and figure out how to go on, because I still have bills to pay, and I still have to wake up every day. And I have, people reaching out to me that literally say, how do you do it? Because maybe they're going through something similar, and they don't have the motivation to wake up.
Right.
And I was like, well, what the alternative is, me staying in bed and dying or killing myself. But in the end, that means John wins. And I will do everything in my power to make sure that he's already taken my son. He's already taken me, that he can't win anymore. He can't have any more power. And I just try to remember that. And I try to do things for Greyson. And when I travel or do things, I imagine Greyson being there, and I imagine holding his hand and what he would say or what he would want to do. And I do those things for him.
That's a question I get often, is how does she get out of bed? How does she
It's hard.
life?
And some days I don't get out of bed. Some days I'm like, I'm just not getting out of bed today.
Yeah. And I think that every day that you get out of bed and do something productive like this that adds good into the world is a win. And it's something for Greyson's memory.
I know that, right after his death, I had, a great support system with other protective parents that wanted, see these types of changes occur in, not just Florida, but in general in family court. And, everyone was so instrumental in making change that we were able to get a new law drafted, which actually, went through House and Senate twice. And then the second time around, it did get passed, and Greyson's law went into effect in 2023, which now, helps make it easier for a judge to step in when one parent is harming another parent.
Right. And I mean, it's incredible that you were able to dust yourself off and make something good from this horrific thing that happened.
Well, I mean, it was helpful in the way, I was reading the book about grief that said, the sixth phase of grief is, finding meaning and purpose. And I just, the outpour of questions that people came to me with, and everyone had advice or wanted to get advice. And I started the foundation Greyson's Choice because I wanted everyone to know what happened. I want everyone to know how I was wronged, how Greyson was wronged, and all of the injustices that occurred, from lawyers, from judges, from police officers, from DCF and Child Protective Services. I mean, the level of injustice was just never ending. And I wanted everyone to hear this story because it was shocking to me that I couldn't get the help that I needed. That even if Greyson was still alive, I still would be living a tormented life with John as he was.
Yes.
But Greyson's Choice is now a nonprofit 501c3. We had our first fundraiser this past February called Bubbles and Brunch,
which was so fun.
It was. We were able to raise a lot of money, and I always say, like, I don't know how to help all of these amazing parents that reach out to me who are scared, who are sad, who are going through similar experiences or other, crazy experiences. And, I have no advice other. I say, take your kid and run away because there will be no one here. There will be nothing to protect you. And I don't have advice. So the only thing that I can think of to help all these people is to be a resource, and hence this podcast. I'm hoping over the course of, the next few months to start rolling out some very insightful conversations with different experts and people in their, different fields, from doctors and law firms and counselors and therapists and just parents that have their own experiences to share. I'm hoping that, it will definitely be helpful for our listeners to get information that will be useful for them, or at least just to learn more and educate.
It's so important, this conversation. Would you want to explain really quickly about what Greyson's Law adds or changes to the Florida law?
Well, in layman's term, because it's, there's a lot of mumbo jumbo.
Yeah.
But so part of my issue was that they said, that John was harming me.
Right.
And that he wasn't harming the child. So, although I don't know if he was or not because I never saw them. But so basically Greyson's Law now introduces that if one parent is harming the other parent,
or threatening,
or you believe that you are or believe to be in imminent danger, which is big because before that didn't exist, then a judge can look at the facts and step in and remove the child from the home, or at least to make an informed decision.
Right. Okay.
Before that, like I said, they were only looking at like, well, were they hurting the child? Yes. But I mean, I always say, I'm like, if a human being is hurting another human being, who does it matter who they're hurting? They're not fit. They're not fit to be a parent. They are not. If you don't live a life hurting people and then, are okay with a toddler, it's like people, say, so Hitler was a father, he'd be a great dad because he was only killing the Jews, but I'm sure he was a really great dad.
Yeah. And I think that's such common sense law reform.
It's very common sense to me. Like if someone is breaking the law, if someone is causing harm, then someone needs to step in. And it makes me sick to my stomach that I was the guinea pig and Greyson, had to pay the price, and this common sense didn't exist. I mean, it's mind-boggling that we couldn't get the help we needed.
Well, it's pretty incredible that through your grief, you were able to go to Tallahassee and get this law passed. And it was not an easy fix. You had a draft that did not pass the first year.
There was a lot of language in the first draft about coercive control that didn't make it through. And we had to cut a lot out the second time around, which is still something that I feel passionate about getting amended back in, or, I just want more shed light on the topic of coercive control, because it is so common in ways that people might not even realize. And it's really important to just educate, especially lawyers and doctors and judges, and so that they recognize that this is abuse. I didn't have physical scars yet, but I was tormented daily.
Right. And I would say that it was a great day for your advocacy work when the bill passed. And it didn't just pass through the majority. It passed.
It was unanimous
with a Republican, Democratic, Congress. I mean, that is a huge win.
Yeah, we had, it was obviously bipartisan, unanimous, and almost like every senator or House representative wanted to be a co-sponsor to the bill because everyone just felt like it was just so important that it had to pass. Again, it's not where I would want it fully, but it does show a step in the right direction and at least makes people, politicians aware and legislature aware these things are going on and we need to make changes. And there's still so many changes that need to be made and I can't do it alone. And I'm hoping that, through Greyson's Choice, through this podcast, maybe, we can shed some more light because there's so many stories that I hear. I went to Washington, D.C. to try to get conversations about getting child safety laws passed federally, which is, we do have Caden's law.
Right.
And I met all of these people that some were victims and some were other parents, where they're just accused of parental alienation and their child was court ordered to go to this camp, a reunification camp, because they feel like one parent was brainwashing the other parent. And the stories that I heard were just endlessly sad and they have to be heard.
So are there any upcoming projects or initiatives that you're excited about in your advocacy work?
Well, I'm excited to see where this podcast goes because obviously I'll probably learn a lot more. And through my conversations on the people that I meet with and talk with, or that we meet with and talk with, that, will drive some more ideas and maybe more connections and, more ways to get the word out.
Yeah. And hopefully another fantastic fundraiser for Greyson's Choice this year.
I mean, obviously, we'll rely on donations to, keep it going for, to get, more, to keep this podcast going, to keep us going.
And advocacy work is never fully finished. There's going to always be more work we can do.
No, there's always more to be done, especially in family court. It's so broken that it is going, it's not even going to happen in my lifetime.
Yes, but you are doing wonderful things in honor of our Greyson.
Well, I'm trying. I would trade places with anyone and gladly be at home watching cartoons with him. But unfortunately, this is my new norm.
And I'm lucky to call you a friend because you amaze and inspire me every day.
Well, thank you. And I will say to everyone that's listening that I probably wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for this girl because support is really what you do need to get up, especially, in the initial days right after, something traumatic happens, and of course, my friends, my family, my boyfriend, my doctors, my therapists, they all play their own role. But it takes a village and it's never something that I'm going to get over or be over with, or I just have to figure out how I can go on, and live the rest of my life,
Well, I'll be here watching.
Well,
I can't wait to see what you do next.
Well, either can I.
And I think the podcast is going to be fabulous.
Well, thank you. Well, if you have any other questions that you think our listeners would want to know about their host.
What's your favorite TV show right now?
Oh, goodness. I will say I've been watching General Hospital since I was 6 years old. I wouldn't quite say that.
Is that still on?
It's still on.
Oh my gosh.
I watch.
Sunny? Is Sunny still on?
Sunny is still on.
Oh my goodness.
I watch, I don't even know what I just watched. We just watched 10 seasons of The Blacklist.
Yeah.
I just watched The Bear. Actually, I just watched a show called Fallout that your brother recommended.
Yeah.
I don't really have a favorite, but, I try to keep up. Keep up.
Well, and it is interesting that you are someone who has suffered more than anyone else I know, but yet your light still shines so bright and you're still one of the most fun people to be around.
Well, I thank you. I find that hard to believe.
It's very true. Because they can't he didn't steal your soul. You are still there. You are still you. You are still the girl I met should I say a number of years?
Yeah.
A long time ago. So,
well, thank you.
All right.
Well, thank you all for listening. And if you have any questions for me or for Erin Cooper, please feel free to email at Ali@graysonschoice.org. And I will hopefully get back to you as soon as possible. And maybe your questions will be aired live on our podcast. If you have any guests, suggestions that you would like, I will be taking those as well. So please contact me and let me know who you want to hear from.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for doing this, and thank you for listening.